Radio Rockland.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm joined now in the studio by Benjamin Ashmore. He's from the National Family Civil Rights Center, which is based out of Washington, D.C. It's the only national nonprofit solely focused on protecting and enhancing the civil rights of parents and children in all types of families. Ben, welcome aboard.
Jeff, how are you this afternoon?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Tell me a little bit about what gave birth to your organization and what it is that New York State is looking to do and what you're encouraging New York State to do.
Sure. Well, we are an organization that has two arms. We have an advocacy arm and we have a litigation arm. So in states and at the federal level, we work on issues that affect families. And then in issues where there are litigation concerns, we go into court and we work with parties and with families to try and improve the law. So, and here in New York, and something that is very pressing and important right now is some pending legislation, as you referred to earlier, that really affects families. Explain
what the legislation's all about and what it is that you're talking about when it comes to make sure that families are treated as equal.
Yeah, there has been a movement around the country to put in place what's called shared parenting laws. For your listeners out there who haven't had the unfortunate circumstances where they've been involved in custody litigation. Essentially, when there's a breakup of a marriage and a family is in court, courts are often asked to make what's called physical custody determinations and legal custody determinations. And legal custody simply refers to who gets to make the decisions with the children. So if there's a joint legal custody, both parents make decisions about the children. If there is a physical custody, oftentimes that refers to one parent having primary physical custody, and then the other parent has what is often becomes an every other weekend and a couple of weeks during the summertime. So what's been going on around the country in other states, and New York is finally coming on board, is a push towards shared parenting. And what that basically means is a lot of research out there that says that children do best when they have equal time with each parent. So what we have in New York, and for the listeners out there listening, it's very important to call your state assembly and state senate members in the Committee on Judiciary in the New York Assembly and in the Committee on Children and Families in the New York Senate. There's legislation pending that would require judges to begin, in any case, with a presumption that the children will spend equal time with each parent. And of course, when circumstances, when that's not in the best interest of the children, they can deviate from that. But it begins with the presumption that at the end of the day, however it works out, the children will spend equal time with their parents. Back in the 70s, there was a clear preference for one parent over the other. And what happened in a number of states, New York included, is that they formally did away with the presumption based on the sex of a parent. And so on paper, there was the idea that all parents are equal. But what judges do in practice, which is very common, is they do the every other weekend for one parent, either the mother or the father, and a couple weeks during the summertime, and then the children live with the other parent. And there's two important problems with that. One problem is the research shows that children do best when they have the ability to spend equal amounts of time with both of their parents. But the more immediate and pressing problem is when you have a system like that, it basically sets up to the parents where one is a winner and one is a loser. The children live with one parent and they spend substantially less time with the other parent. And unfortunately, for anyone who's practiced in the family law area and to anybody who's been a participant in as a party or as a child knows that oftentimes when families go into court, it's not the best time. Emotional hostilities are at their height. Parents are very upset. And sometimes, all of that gets wrapped up into these long and protracted litigation battles where someone is a winner and someone is a loser with the children. So what the research has shown is that in states that have passed this law, what it essentially does is it removes that perverse incentive for families to spend a lot of money and a lot of time fighting over who gets to be that winner and who gets to be that loser. And at the end, people walk into court already knowing that at the end of the day when they walk out, they're probably going to have the children half of the time. And so it removes that added aspect of contention in litigation that unfortunately causes families a lot of money and harms children in the long run.
At some point, sometimes do you find that the parents who are involved in a litigation like this or in a custody case like this, one right off the bat will say, well, you know what, it's more of a burden for me to have the kids 50% of the time, so let's not start there. I'm okay with the whole I'll take every other weekend kind of a thing, or maybe there are the children who are their thoughts involved or considered in this sort of thing, where they say, well, you know what, I don't want to spend time with that adult, I want to spend time with that parent. I mean, how much of that comes into play?
Well, I should make a distinction, Jeff. There are a number of cases that get settled very quickly, and the parents go in, and it's exactly that type of equation that you're talking about. The parents are not going to fight over this. It's not going to be a matter of litigation, and it's going to be quickly resolved. This litigation, or this legislation that is out there, is really focused on the cases where people do extensively contest this. And we didn't mention at the beginning, the Assembly bill is A6457, and the Senate bills are 949 and 5316. Those are the bills that are presently pending in committee, trying to get voted out of committee so they can be presented to the full Senate and the full Assembly. But yes, this really is focused on those cases where parents contest this out. And as the family law area has developed over time, one of the things that has been borne out is when you can remove these areas of contention between parties, the litigation goes much smoother and much quicker. It was only recently that New York passed legislation that allowed for no-fault divorce. So now parents can go.
That was about a year and a half ago, no?
It was about 2 years ago that it was finally put into place. And New York was the last state in the union to put in place that litigation. But what you find when you survey family law around the country is once parents no longer have to fight about whatever they each feel went personally wrong in their marriage, and they're not spending precious family resources on lawyers and litigation to fight about who is at fault. They simply go into court, they acknowledge that it's a no-fault divorce, and they go on their merry ways and move to heal from that process of divorce. So in the states where there has been a move towards shared parenting, they have found the same experiences.
You mentioned how New York State, in the no-fault divorce cases, was last in the union to implement that sort of thing. New York State sounds to me like, in the legislation you're talking about now, is not quite first, but would be one of the first states to go in that direction. No,
actually, New York is one of the last states to be trying to push this through, and it is especially important in New York compared with how New York family law works.
Why would New York be lacking in that way? I mean, there's no shame in being last in anything. I mean, that happens sometimes. But why is this not a priority for New York State, or why have some of the other states said, or like whether it's Mississippi or California or Michigan or whoever, what made them jump on the bandwagon earlier rather than later?
Well, it is a sentiment that is strongly felt by people who are in this field. We don't take a position one way or on the other on it, but we do note that it is out there. In New York, for example, New York does not enumerate any of the factors that are used in custody determinations. There are only 9 states in the country that do not enumerate the factors that judges use to award custody. In other states, for example, judges are required to go through a checklist of different factors, and that's how they determine custody.
For example, what kind of factors are you talking about?
Well, I'll give you an example. Let's use Michigan, for example. Michigan has a 14-point factor system that judges have to go through. And if parents want to contest custody, then the judges have to rank each parent on each of those 14 factors, and they range from the love and care and affection of the children to things like which parent has a better school system, which parent has family dynamics at home that would be better for the children. And in those states, if judges don't actually go through in their decisions and point out how this was ranked and how they decided it, their decisions are reversed on appeal. New York has absolutely none of that. In New York, there are no enumerated factors for deciding who gets custody. So right there, that opens us up a system where lawyers can spend a lot of time arguing based on who has the best interests.
And therefore judges have a lot more information or detail to sift through when they make a decision eventually.
They have much more information to sift through, and in New York in particular, New York uses a process that appoints their psychologists, usually, sometimes social workers, but they're what's called forensic evaluators, and they come into the family at very high costs. The New York Times ran an article several years ago pointing out that forensic evaluations can sometimes cost families as much as $40,000. So what it does is it creates this system where there's a lot of gray, and because there is gray and it's not clearly defined, parents can spend a lot of money to their lawyers, to experts, fighting about who is best and trying to put a little bit of black and white into what is very gray. And in the end, the true losers are the economics of the family and the children who are caught up in this contentious process that many times is not really a function of which parent has the best interest of the child at stake, but more is a function of the temporary emotional hostility that the parents feel towards each other. So that's, to answer a long-winded answer to your question, that's really what it can be. It can be the fact that the lawyers get involved and the psychologists get involved, and there's a lot of money to be made. And in the end, that money is coming out of the family economics of children and parents in New York.
Explain to me a little bit more, again, about the bills. If people are interested, what can they do to show their support? Do you have any support in the legislature at this point, or in the Assembly and the Senate, rather?
Well, the bills have been introduced, and in particular for the listeners that are represented by David Buchwald in District 93 and Kenneth Zabrowski in District 96. Both of those members of the New York Assembly are on the Committee on Judiciary, so it certainly helps to call those members and ask them to vote this out of committee and present it to the full floor. If you go to our website at NFCRC.org, our letters, our formal letters to the Senate Committee and the Judiciary Committee are online, and we give in our letters, on the last page, we give the names and email addresses of all of the Assembly members and the Senate members, so you can contact them directly. And even if your local Assembly member or Senate member is not on these committees, you can still call them and ask them to sign on to support the bill so that this can gain traction and be passed out, and New York can join the growing list of U.S. states that put the interests of children first and say that children should be with both parents.
AM 1300 Radio Rockland.